My name is Charlotte Kensington. I'm 35 years old, and before that dinner happened, I used to believe silence could keep a family together. I do not believe that anymore. The night started with candles, expensive plates, and Linda Mercer pretending to smile at me from across the table, like she had not spent the last 6 years quietly reminding me I was never good enough for her son. Daniel sat beside me, scrolling through his phone under the table, whenever conversations became uncomfortable, which lately was almost every conversation involving his parents. Across from us sat Ava, my daughter, 10 years old. Quiet, gentle, the kind of child who apologized when other people stepped on her shoes. She had brought her birthday tablet to dinner because Linda specifically asked what she got for her birthday 3 days earlier. I should have known the question was a trap. The tablet was still inside the pale lavender case Evelyn had bought for her. Ava had already downloaded art programs onto it and spent hours sketching tiny digital portraits of birds and lakes and people holding umbrellas in the rain. That tablet mattered to her. Not because it was expensive, because someone had finally given her something that felt like hers. Linda reached across the table and lightly tapped the box with one manicured nail. "This is very expensive," she said casually. Mark glanced over from his wine glass. "Latest model, too." Ava looked nervous already. She always became smaller around Daniel's parents, like she could somehow disappear if she stayed quiet enough. Then Linda smiled. The kind of smile that always came right before she said something cruel. "She doesn't really need something this advanced," she said. "You should give it to Tyler." The room froze. I honestly thought I had misheard her at first. Ava's fingers stopped moving beside her plate. Daniel adjusted his napkin without looking at anyone. Linda continued, like this was the most reasonable suggestion in the world. "Tyler's preparing for college applications next year. He could actually use this for school." Tyler, the Mercer family's golden child. 16 years old, varsity soccer captain, straight-A student, future lawyer, according to Linda. Every holiday somehow turned into a celebration of whatever Tyler had recently accomplished. Meanwhile, Ava liked drawing foxes and reading fantasy novels under blankets with flashlights. Linda always acted like that made her less important. "She uses it for school, too," I said carefully. "And for her art classes." Mark leaned back in his chair. "Tyler's future depends on opportunities like this. An edge." That was the word he used next. "He needs every edge he can get." Ava finally looked up. Her eyes moved between their faces before landing on mine. "Am I not serious?" The question sliced through me so hard I felt it physically. Daniel cleared his throat. But no words came out. Not one. And suddenly, every small humiliation from the last 6 years came rushing back at once. Every comparison. Every comment about Ava being too sensitive. Every holiday where Tyler opened expensive gifts while Ava received books about manners or puzzles meant for younger kids. Linda reached for the tablet box and slowly slid it closer to herself. "We can send it home with Tyler tonight," she said. "He's stopping by later anyway." That was the moment my mother stood up. Evelyn Kensington was not loud when she was angry. That made her terrifying. She calmly placed one hand over the box and pulled it back toward Ava. "Put that back." The entire table went silent. Linda blinked slowly. "Excuse me?" "I bought that tablet for my granddaughter," Evelyn said. "With my money." Mark laughed awkwardly. "No one's attacking you." Evelyn ignored him completely. Instead, she looked directly at Daniel. And before I could stop her, she said the sentence that changed everything. "Maybe if your boyfriend bought things for his own daughter once in a while, we wouldn't be having this conversation." Daniel's face lost color instantly. Linda shot up from her chair so fast it scraped violently across the floor. Ava flinched. Then, quietly, almost protectively, she pulled the tablet against her chest, like she thought someone might physically take it from her. "What did you just say?" Linda snapped. "You heard me," Evelyn replied. Daniel finally spoke. "Can we not do this right now?" That was his response. Not defending Ava. Not correcting his parents. Just asking everyone to stay calm. I felt something inside me begin cracking open. Evelyn stayed standing. "Charlotte and Ava never asked any of you for anything," she said. "Ava earned that gift. Straight A report card, perfect attendance, first place in her school art competition." Linda crossed her arms. "Tyler has straight A's too, and he's applying to universities. His future actually matters." I stared at her. "So Ava's doesn't?" Mark stood now too. "No one said that." "It's exactly what you implied," Evelyn answered coldly. The room felt hot suddenly, like there wasn't enough air. Daniel looked at me with panic in his eyes, like he wanted me to fix everything for him. Like I was still responsible for keeping peace between his family and mine. "I'm not giving Ava's tablet to anyone," I said. "That's final." Linda turned sharply toward Daniel. "Say something." He rubbed both hands over his face. "It's just a tablet," he muttered. "Maybe Tyler could borrow it sometimes." "Borrow it." Ava's fingers tightened around the case, and something inside me finally shattered completely. "No," I said quietly. "He can't borrow it. He can't touch it. It belongs to Ava." Linda gave a short laugh. "You're being dramatic. This is about fairness." "Fairness?" Evelyn repeated. Then she dropped another truth directly onto the table. "Your son hasn't had stable work in almost 2 years. Charlotte works double shifts at the clinic. I paid their rent last month. And you're talking about fairness?" Daniel's head snapped toward her. "You didn't need to bring that up." Apparently I did. For the first time all evening, Linda's expression changed. Not embarrassed. Calculating. "If you can't properly provide for your daughter," she said carefully to Daniel, "maybe you should let us step in more." There it was. The real conversation finally revealing itself. Ava whispered so softly I almost didn't hear her. "I can give it back if it's causing problems." My heart broke instantly. My 10-year-old daughter was willing to surrender her birthday gift just to make adults stop fighting. I stood so quickly, my chair nearly tipped over. "No," I said firmly, "you are not giving anything back." Mark looked irritated now. "You're overreacting." "Guide us into what?" I asked. Linda answered immediately. "Doing what's best for Ava." The words sounded harmless, but underneath them was something ugly, something possessive. "Stable people should make stable decisions," Mark added. Stable. I knew exactly what they meant. Poor. Dependent. Not polished enough. Not successful enough. Evelyn understood too. "If you think you're more entitled to that child than her mother," she said coldly, "we're going to have a very serious problem." Daniel stepped between everyone finally. "This is getting out of hand." "No," I said quietly. "It's finally honest." Linda looked directly at me. Maybe Ava would be better off spending more time here anyway. The sentence landed like ice water. Ava looked confused, like she genuinely thought she might suddenly be sent somewhere else. "What does that mean?" I asked. Mark answered. "It means she needs structure, stability, direction." By direction, he meant wealth. By stability, he meant obedience. "We are her parents," I said. Linda nodded slowly. "Of course, but children thrive in certain environments." Evelyn's eyes narrowed instantly. "You're talking about her like she's up for negotiation." Daniel started pacing toward the kitchen and back. "Can we all calm down?" Nobody listened to him anymore. Linda walked around the table and rested her hand on Ava's shoulder. "You'd love staying with us more often," she said softly. "We have space, quiet, no stress." Ava gently leaned away from her touch. "I like my room." Linda smiled tightly. "Children don't always know what's best for them." That sentence made my stomach twist. Evelyn stepped forward immediately. "Do not talk about her like she isn't sitting right here." Mark's voice hardened. "You're guests in our home." "And you're discussing our daughter like she belongs to you," I shot back. Then Linda said the thing that changed the entire atmosphere permanently. "If you're struggling financially," she said calmly, "there are legal ways to make sure Ava has what she needs." The room went dead silent. Legal ways. Nobody said custody. But suddenly the word was sitting between us anyway. Daniel finally looked alarmed. "Mom, stop." Linda never took her eyes off me. "We would step in if necessary." Ava's voice trembled. "Am I in trouble?" That was it. I grabbed my purse immediately. "We're leaving." Mark blocked the doorway for half a second too long before stepping aside. "You're blowing this out of proportion." Number. They already had. I helped Ava into her coat, while Evelyn gathered her things beside me. Daniel followed us outside without even saying goodbye to his parents. The drive home was silent, except for the sound of Ava clutching the tablet against her chest every time the car turned. 5 minutes passed before Daniel finally spoke. "You didn't have to escalate things like that." I turned slowly toward him. "Escalate? You made it into a fight." I stared at him in disbelief. "Your parents practically threatened to take our daughter, and you think I escalated it?" He dragged a hand through his hair. "They wouldn't actually do that. You don't know that." He said nothing. And for the first time since I fell in love with him, I looked at Daniel Mercer and felt like I was sitting beside a stranger. When we pulled into the driveway, Evelyn didn't get out immediately. She looked directly at me. "Charlotte," she said quietly, "they're not done." Deep down, I already knew she was right. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ava's face at the dinner table when Linda tried to slide the tablet away from her. That expression stayed with me. Not anger. Not even sadness. Fear. The kind of fear children develop when they realize adults can suddenly change the rules without warning. Around 2 in the morning, Ava quietly climbed into bed beside me, carrying the tablet against her chest. She didn't say anything. She simply placed it carefully on the nightstand, like it needed protection too. Daniel slept on the far edge of the mattress facing the wall, farther away than he had ever felt. The next morning, I tried convincing myself maybe everything would cool down. Maybe Linda had gone too far and would realize it after sleeping on it. Maybe Mark would talk her down. Maybe Daniel would finally stand up to them. Then my phone rang. Linda. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, Daniel's phone started ringing. He sighed heavily before answering and stepping into the hallway. I could still hear her voice through the speaker. "You embarrassed us." Daniel rubbed his forehead. "Mom, not right now. That woman had no right speaking to us like that." That woman. Not Evelyn. Not Charlotte's mother. Just that woman. I stepped into the hallway. "Put it on speaker." Daniel hesitated. Charlotte. Put it on speaker. Slowly, he did. Linda's voice changed immediately when she realized I could hear her.
Calmer. Sharper.
More controlled. Charlotte, she said smoothly, Mark and I have been talking about Ava. A cold feeling spread through my stomach. Talking about what? We think it might be good for her to stay with us for a little while. I actually laughed once because the alternative was screaming. You're serious? You work 12-hour shifts, Linda continued. Daniel's still trying to stabilize his career situation. That environment isn't ideal for a child. My environment? I asked quietly. You know what I mean. Daniel finally spoke. Mom, we're fine. Your rent was paid by Evelyn last month, Linda snapped. That is not fine. I looked at Daniel sharply. He stared at the floor. So she knew everything. Every struggle. Every embarrassing detail Daniel had apparently shared with them while I worked overtime trying to keep our lives together. Outside interference has become a major issue, Linda continued. Outside interference. That was how she described my mother buying groceries for us. Helping with utilities. Paying for Ava's field trip. If you're implying I can't take care of my daughter, I said carefully, say it directly. A pause. Then Mark's voice joined the call. If necessary, we'll consult someone who can determine what's in Ava's best interest. There it was again. That cold, legal tone. Like they had already rehearsed these conversations together. Daniel finally ended the call. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then he muttered, They're just upset. I stared at him. They threatened us. They didn't mean it literally. How do you know? He opened his mouth, closed it again. That silence told me more than any argument could have. I walked back into Ava's room and found her sitting cross-legged on the floor, drawing little watercolor flowers on her tablet. She looked up nervously. Are Grandma Linda and Grandpa Mark mad at me? No, I said immediately, even though it was partially true. Are they going to make me live there? The question nearly destroyed me. I crouched beside her and touched her hair gently. No one is taking you anywhere. I said it confidently, but for the first time, I wasn't completely sure. By noon, Evelyn was at our front door, carrying coffee and a folder stuffed with paperwork. I told her everything about the call. She didn't look surprised. I've seen people like this before, she said quietly. When they can't control the adults, they go after the child. Daniel sat silently at the kitchen table while she spoke. Evelyn turned directly toward him. You need to decide whose side you're on. There are no sides, he muttered. There are always sides when someone threatens custody. The word hit the room like broken glass. Daniel stood abruptly. No one threatened custody. Your father talked about consulting someone, Evelyn shot back. That is not a casual conversation. Daniel didn't answer. And then, almost like the universe wanted to prove her right immediately, someone knocked on the door. Not casually.
Firmly. Professionally.
Every nerve in my body tightened. Evelyn reached the door first and opened it slowly. A woman stood outside, holding a folder. She introduced herself calmly as a child services caseworker. My blood turned cold instantly. She explained a report had been filed, expressing concern about instability in Ava's home environment.
Financial insecurity. Emotional conflict.
Questions about parental supervision. Linda's words echoed through my head. We'll consult someone. They already had. For a second, I honestly thought I might faint. The social worker remained polite and composed while stepping inside. She glanced around the living room quietly. Ava sat on the carpet with her tablet in her lap.
Confused.
Small.
Terrified.
"Who is that?" she whispered. I swallowed hard. "Someone making sure everything's okay." The woman interviewed me first. Then Daniel. Then Ava, privately in her bedroom. While Ava spoke with her, I stood outside the door, feeling physically ill. I kept imagining one wrong sentence, one misunderstood answer, one moment of nervousness from Ava being twisted into evidence against us. Daniel paced constantly. "This is insane," he kept whispering. "My parents overreacted." "Overreacting doesn't usually involve filing reports," I snapped. Evelyn stayed calm. Almost frighteningly calm. She had already spread documents across the kitchen table.
Lease agreements.
School records. Medical records. Attendance reports. Utility bills. The receipt for Ava's birthday tablet. Every piece of proof showing our daughter was cared for and loved. The social worker asked me steady, careful questions. Was there food in the home? Yes. Did Ava attend school regularly? Yes. Had there ever been violence inside the home? Absolutely not. Did Ava appear emotionally distressed? Only because adults kept fighting around her. When the woman finally stepped out of Ava's room after nearly 20 minutes, my entire body tensed. "She seems very well cared for," the social worker said gently. "She speaks positively about both of you." Air finally returned to my lungs. But then she added something else. "However, repeated allegations from family members can sometimes trigger extended evaluations."
Repeated.
Meaning Linda and Mark were not planning to stop. Daniel sank into a chair and covered his face with both hands. "I can't believe they actually did this." "I could." That was the horrifying part. The social worker left politely, assuring us the case would likely close quickly if no further concerns appeared. The second the door shut, silence swallowed the house. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Linda. "We are only trying to protect our granddaughter." Protect her from what? From me? From the woman working herself to exhaustion, trying to give her a stable life, while their son drifted between temporary jobs and excuses? I looked at Daniel. Something inside me changed right there. Not anger anymore.
Clarity.
Cold and undeniable. "If you think I'm going to raise Ava under constant threats from your parents," I said quietly, "you're wrong." His eyes widened immediately. "So, what are you saying?" Before I could answer, Evelyn spoke first. "Charlotte and Ava can stay with me for a while." Daniel looked stunned. "That's unnecessary." "Maybe it isn't," Evelyn replied. At that exact moment, Ava walked slowly into the kitchen, clutching the tablet against her chest again. She had clearly overheard enough to understand what was happening. "Are we moving?" she asked softly. I looked at her tiny hands gripping that tablet like it was the only stable thing left in her world. "Maybe temporarily," I whispered. Daniel's voice cracked then. "You're seriously leaving because of this?" I finally looked directly at him. "I'm leaving because your parents tried taking something from our daughter and you stayed silent." He looked away. "When they implied she'd be better off away from me, you hesitated." His jaw tightened. "And when they reported us to child services, you were shocked instead of prepared." "Charlotte, that's not partnership, Daniel." He didn't argue. Maybe because he knew I was right. By evening, 2 suitcases sat near the front door. Ava packed her sketchbooks first, then the tablet charger, then the stuffed rabbit she'd slept with since kindergarten. As I carried the bags outside, headlights slowly rolled past our house. A dark SUV. Linda's SUV. She didn't stop, didn't wave. She just drove slowly enough to let us know she was watching. And in that moment, standing in the cold driveway beside my frightened daughter, I realized something terrifying. Evelyn had been right. They weren't done. But neither was I. Moving into my mother's house was supposed to feel temporary. Instead, it felt like waking up after surviving an accident you didn't realize was happening while it destroyed your life. Evelyn's house sat near the edge of a quiet neighborhood, lined with maple trees and cracked sidewalks. Ava immediately seemed calmer there. She slept through the night again within the first week. Daniel noticed it too. I could see the guilt in his face every time he visited. At first, he came almost every evening, carrying takeout and awkward apologies that never quite became accountability. "I'm trying to talk to them," he kept saying. Talk. As if this situation could still be solved with a calm conversation over coffee. One night, he stood in Evelyn's kitchen while Ava worked on a digital drawing nearby. "She misses home," he said quietly. I looked at him for a long moment. "This is home right now." His shoulders sagged. "You know what I mean." "No. Actually, I didn't anymore." Because the apartment we had shared no longer felt safe in my memory. Every room now carried the feeling of instability, of waiting for another knock on the door. Daniel stepped closer to me. "My parents went too far." That sentence should have comforted me. Instead, it irritated me. "Went too far?" I repeated. "Daniel, they filed a report trying to question our parenting. They thought they were helping." I stared at him in disbelief. "That's still your defense?" His expression changed slightly then. Not angry. Lost. And for the first time, I realized something painful about Daniel Mercer. He had spent his entire life surviving Linda and Mark by surrendering to them, appeasing them, minimizing them, convincing himself their control was normal because accepting the truth would mean admitting they had controlled him too. But I was too exhausted to save him from that realization. A few days later, the first legal email arrived. Mark sent it directly to me. The message was cold, formal, carefully worded. They requested structured visitation with Ava because they were concerned I was intentionally distancing her from extended family support systems. At the bottom sat a lawyer's signature. I read the email twice before handing the phone to Evelyn. She barely reacted. "Good," she said calmly. I blinked. "Good?" Now they're documenting their behavior. That same afternoon, she drove me to meet an attorney. Her name was Patricia Doyle. Sharp eyes, gray blazer, no patience for manipulation. After reading everything, Patricia leaned back slowly. "So let me understand this correctly," she said. "His parents attempted to pressure your daughter into surrendering personal property, implied you were unfit due to finances, filed a questionable report to Child Services, and are now threatening visitation claims?" When she summarized it like that, the insanity became impossible to ignore. "Yes," I said quietly. Patricia nodded once. "They've already damaged their own credibility." For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to relief. Not safety yet, but direction. The official Child Services investigation closed less than 3 weeks later. The report stated Ava appeared emotionally healthy, academically successful, and securely bonded to both parents. No evidence of neglect. No safety concerns. Case closed. When Patricia read the final statement aloud in her office, I nearly cried from exhaustion alone. But Linda and Mark still refused to stop. 2 days later, they filed for partial visitation rights. Their argument claimed they had maintained significant emotional involvement in Ava's upbringing and feared emotional harm from separation. Patricia actually laughed softly while reading it. False reports rarely help grandparents in family court, she said. Daniel looked physically ill during mediation. The truth kept surfacing, piece by piece, and every new detail made him smaller somehow. Bank statements showed Evelyn had quietly paid nearly half our household expenses during the previous year. Rent assistance, school supplies, utilities, groceries, even Ava's tablet. Meanwhile, Linda had apparently spent months telling relatives she and Mark were financially carrying us. They hadn't contributed $1. Not one. Daniel sat at the mediation table, staring downward, while Patricia calmly dismantled every accusation his parents made. I watched humiliation spread across his face in slow motion. But strangely, I no longer felt satisfaction from it. Only sadness. Because despite everything, part of me still remembered the version of Daniel I fell in love with years earlier. The version who used to dance with Ava in the kitchen when she couldn't sleep. The version who once drove 2 hours at midnight because I casually mentioned craving strawberry pie during pregnancy. That man still existed somewhere, under all the weakness and fear. But not enough to protect us. During one mediation break, Daniel followed me into the hallway. His eyes looked exhausted. I never wanted any of this. I folded my arms tightly. Wanting isn't the same as stopping it. I'm trying now. Now? I whispered. After they threatened custody? After they reported us? His voice cracked. They're still my parents. And Ava is still your daughter. The silence between us felt unbearable. Daniel leaned against the wall like he physically couldn't hold himself upright anymore. I thought if I kept everyone calm, eventually things would settle. That's the problem, I said quietly. You cared more about keeping peace than protecting us. He shut his eyes. Because he knew it was true. The custody hearing itself lasted less than a day. Linda arrived dressed in soft pastel colors, designed to make her appear grandmotherly and harmless. Mark wore a navy suit and the expression of a man still convinced authority naturally belonged to him. Neither of them looked at me directly, but they looked at Ava constantly, like they still believed she was something they could eventually reclaim. Patricia destroyed them gently. That was the terrifying part. Not aggressively. Methodically. She presented the dismissed child services report first. Then the timeline. Then the texts. Then the voicemail transcripts. Then evidence that Linda initiated legal discussions immediately after the tablet incident. The judge's expression hardened more with every document. Finally, Patricia asked the question that shifted the entire room. Mrs. Mercer, she said calmly, can you explain why your first response to disagreement over a child's birthday gift involved discussions about removing that child from her mother's care? Linda's composure cracked for the first time. We were concerned about instability. Instability, Patricia repeated. Or control? Silence. The judge denied their request before the afternoon ended. False allegations.
Manipulative conduct. Insufficient grounds.
Petition denied. Just like that. Outside the courthouse, Linda finally approached Daniel directly. Her voice stayed low, but I still heard every word. You're allowing her to destroy this family. Daniel looked at his mother for a long moment. And something in his face changed. Not strength, exactly. More like grief finally becoming unavoidable. No, he said quietly. You did that. Linda looked stunned. Truly stunned. Like she had never imagined her son would say those words out loud. Mark immediately stepped forward. You don't mean that. But Daniel didn't answer him. He just walked past them toward Ava. She stood beside me, holding my hand tightly. Daniel crouched in front of her carefully. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Ava looked at him with heartbreaking seriousness. "For what part?" The question shattered something inside him completely. I saw it happen in real time. Because there was no single answer anymore. Sorry for the dinner. Sorry for the silence. Sorry for choosing comfort over courage. Sorry for failing her, repeatedly. Daniel's eyes filled instantly, but Ava simply stepped back beside me again. Not cruelly, just cautiously. Like trust had become something fragile now. That night, after everyone finally left, I sat awake beside Evelyn's living room window, staring into darkness. The court victory should have felt triumphant. Instead, I mostly felt tired. Tired of conflict. Tired of fear. Tired of wondering how many quiet compromises had slowly brought us to this point without me noticing. Then, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. I never realized silence could hurt people this much. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I locked the phone without answering. Because finally understanding the damage didn't undo it. And somewhere deep down, I already knew our relationship had quietly ended long before the courtroom ever confirmed it. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning. No dramatic delivery. No screaming argument. Just a plain envelope sitting quietly in Evelyn's mailbox while Ava ate cereal at the kitchen counter, sketching tiny dragons onto her tablet. For a strange moment, I simply stared at the envelope without opening it. Because endings never look the way you imagine they will. I used to think the end of a relationship would sound loud. Doors slamming, crying.
Accusations.
Instead, it sounded like a spoon tapping gently against a cereal bowl while sunlight came through the kitchen curtains. Daniel acted shocked when I officially filed. Even after everything. Even after watching me pack our lives into suitcases and leave. Even after his parents tried using authorities and courts to pressure me into surrendering control over our daughter. He kept insisting we could still fix things. But every time he said it, I realized something painful. Daniel still thought this story began with the custody threats. He never understood it actually began years earlier. With every moment, he chose silence. With every time Ava was compared to Tyler, while he looked away. With every occasion, I became the shield protecting our daughter alone, while he stood behind me, pretending neutrality was harmless. Neutrality is never harmless when someone you love is being diminished. The divorce process moved surprisingly fast after the court denied Linda and Mark's petition. Daniel stopped fighting anything. No arguments over custody. No arguments over property. Almost like part of him finally understood he had already lost something much larger than a marriage. During mediation, he looked exhausted constantly. Older somehow. One afternoon after signing paperwork, he stopped me outside the office building. Rain was falling softly around us. "Charlotte," he said quietly, "I really did love you." I looked at him for a long moment. I know. That was the tragedy of it. Love had never been the problem. Courage was. Ava handled the separation better than I expected. Children understand emotional truth long before adults admit it aloud. One evening, while helping Evelyn fold laundry, Ava looked up at me carefully. "Are Grandma Linda and Grandpa Mark still mad?" I paused before answering. "Probably." She considered that thoughtfully, then nodded once and returned to folding towels. No tears. No panic. Just acceptance. Because children eventually stop expecting safety from people who repeatedly make them feel small. A month later, Evelyn suggested something unexpected. "What if we leave completely?" I looked up from my coffee. "What do you mean?" "There's a clinic hiring near Lake Marion," she said. "Small town, quiet area, better schools." At first, the idea sounded impossible. Then slowly it started sounding like oxygen. Fresh start.
Distance.
Peace. Within 2 months, everything changed. I transferred clinics. Evelyn sold her house. We rented a small blue home near a lake surrounded by pine trees and silence that actually felt peaceful instead of tense. The first night there, Ava stood in her new bedroom, staring out the window at the water. "It's really quiet here," she whispered. Not fearful. Relieved. I realized then how much anxiety had become normal for both of us without me noticing. Middle school terrified Ava initially. She worried nobody would like her. Worried she was too shy, too awkward, too quiet. But during the second week, her art teacher submitted one of her digital drawings into a regional student showcase. The piece won honorable mention. When Ava came home holding the certificate, her entire face glowed with a kind of confidence I hadn't seen in years. "You want to see?" she asked excitedly. I spent nearly 15 minutes listening to her explain every tiny detail of the drawing. And halfway through her explanation, I suddenly realized something almost devastating. She was talking freely. No shrinking. No apologizing. No looking over her shoulder, waiting for someone louder to matter more. Daniel called once a week consistently. At first, conversations with Ava stayed awkward and short. But over time, they slowly became easier. Not healed. Just gentler. Sometimes he visited alone. Never with Linda or Mark. Never again. During one visit, I caught him staring silently at Ava while she worked on an art project at the kitchen table. "What?" I asked quietly. He shook his head slowly. "I didn't realize how much she stopped talking around them." Neither had I. That truth haunted me. Because once you finally see emotional damage clearly, you start noticing all the moments you missed while it was happening. A few months later, Tyler got accepted into a prestigious university. Linda posted a long emotional message online about sacrifice, family values, and supporting the next generation. Hundreds of people commented about what incredible grandparents she and Mark were. I read the post once, then closed the app. Because for the first time in years, their version of reality no longer had power over me. That was freedom too. Not needing toxic people to admit what they did before allowing yourself to move forward. One evening, near the end of summer, Ava sat at the kitchen table, finishing a digital painting on the same tablet Linda once tried taking away from her. Sunlight reflected softly across the screen while she worked. I stood quietly nearby, pretending to clean, just so I could watch her for a moment. She looked older suddenly. Still gentle. Still artistic. But stronger now. Finally, she glanced up at me. "I'm glad we live here." The words hit me harder than I expected. "So am I," I whispered. Ava smiled softly before returning to her drawing. And as I watched her sitting there, safe and peaceful and unapologetically herself, I understood something that took me years to learn. That dinner was never really about a tablet. It was about testing whether I would allow my daughter to become smaller just to make other people comfortable. Linda and Mark believed silence meant permission. They believed politeness meant weakness. They believed I would keep compromising forever, the way Daniel always had. Instead, they pushed too hard. And in doing so, they accidentally forced me to finally see the truth. Not just about them, about myself. About the kind of mother I wanted to be. About the kind of love a child deserves. Sometimes the worst night of your life is actually the first night you stop abandoning yourself. And sometimes, losing the family you married into is the only reason you finally build the one you and your child truly needed all along.